When it comes to implementing change in our life, whether it be with our thinking, our behaviors, or any habit that we feel is no longer serving us or beneficial to us, or indeed when it comes to any healing process, we tend to overestimate the role of motivation and desire to change. We tend to assume that just wanting something is enough. And there are a few things that we neglect to consider. And I suppose first up is the importance of having a why that is in alignment with your values and what it is that you actually desire from your life. And I suppose oftentimes when we decide we're going to do something, it's because we assume it'll gain us the approval of others or that it'll make us look good in the eyes of others. And it's not necessarily something we enjoy or something that gives us any level of fulfillment. So it's important that we have an emotional motivation. And oftentimes, the more connected you are to whatever it is that you decide you want to do, the more likely you are to remain consistent even when the going gets tough. It's kind of putting something in place that really means a lot to you as opposed to something that's arbitrary and perhaps glamorous. And then it's recognizing that any change is difficult. I mean, our own brain is working against us. Our brain likes consistency, even if that consistency is making us miserable. So any sort of change is going to put our brain into a state of resistance, and all of a sudden we'll find ourselves, without even thinking about it or recognizing that we're doing it, procrastinating or setting standards for ourselves that aren't really realistic, or coming up with obstacles, creating problems where there are none. And we can overthink ourselves into a state of paralysis and keep ourselves in a state of anxiety. And when we're anxious, we cannot move forward. We cannot put appropriate action into place. And oftentimes we have to disregard what's going on up here and just act. We actually have to do something. We have to act our way into thinking differently. And this goes for mood as well. We tend to assume that we can only do something when we feel like doing it. And this is very rarely the case, particularly when it comes to a lot of the things that are particularly good for us, such as having a contemplative practice or, kind of creating a level of self-awareness. It's always going to be easier to default into rumination, or negative thinking, because that's what's compelling to our brains. That's what we're programmed to do. And we tend to as well spend a lot of time, zoning out, or a lot of time on our social media. And then we tell ourselves, oh, I don't know where today went. So it's recognizing that oftentimes you're going to have to remain very aware of where you allow your mind to go, and making sure that it is in alignment with what it is that you want to do. And also recognize that sometimes you're not going to feel like doing it, but you may just need to push yourself to doing it anyway in order for you to build the momentum to actually enjoy it. And I see this so much even in my writing work. I find sometimes the thought of sitting down and writing for half an hour is just completely overwhelming. Whereas if I'm like, okay, do you know what? I'm just going to write 100 words today, and then I'm going to let myself off the hook. And sometimes I do just write 100 words, but more often than not, momentum takes over and I end up writing for the 30 minutes. And it's just getting started. It's just doing a small little bit and tricking your brain into action. You also have to be aware that your brain is also going to keep you in a state of fear, because again, it doesn't like uncertainty. It doesn't like when there's no guaranteed results, and it doesn't like when it has to work for something. We love instant gratification, and we live in a culture that promises us it all the time. So we don't often have the tolerance or patience or commitment or discipline to stick with things that don't give us an instant result. And oftentimes these are the things we need to implement. And I suppose specifically, kind of contemplative practices, they can be tedious, and there's a lot of drudgery there, and there is no instantaneous result. But yes, when we do them over a period of time, we do notice a difference in the way in which we respond to our lives. We do notice a shift in our level of awareness, and it's all about those little incremental changes. But again, the consistency is required. So it's about recognizing that oftentimes the benefit isn't something that you can necessarily see straight away, but you can still take a few little steps in the journey towards it, even if you can't see around the corner and the obstacles that are standing in your way. Then there's looking at our capacity to ask for help, because again, social support is time and time again showing to help people do what it is that they want to do. And yes, we tend to assume that we need to do everything by ourselves. We have to be self-sufficient, we have to be independent. And I mean, the more you are involved with other people, the more connected you are with other people, the better you're going to feel, and the more likely you are to stick with something, even if it's just discussing it with somebody else, and kind of the two of you just comparing notes a little bit and giving each other a dig out when you're feeling a little bit stuck. That can be so important. However, when we end up comparing ourselves in a very competitive manner, that is of no benefit to us whatsoever. So recognize that wherever you are on your path is where you're meant to be, and oftentimes that involves a level of faith, just assuming that this is where you're meant to be. The pitfalls that you're experiencing are what is destined for you to learn, whatever it is that you need to learn, and to just keep going. And it's taken those small steps consistently, because again, we assume that we have to race to the end point. And unfortunately, the more we try to take on, or when we try to do too much at once, we become so overwhelmed that we tend to just throw in the towel. So it's recognizing that a little bit of something is better than nothing, and that small steps taken consistently will get you there, and are more likely to get you there than these big massive advancements all the time that you literally can't keep up with, because the small steps create momentum and they give you that sense of achievement, but they're not overwhelming for your brain. They kind of don't scare you out of taking action or sticking with your plan. And make sure everything that you do is in alignment with who it is that you want to be, because again, as I said, if you're only focused on the glorification of what this is going to get you, as opposed to enjoying the actual process, you're just going to be miserable. I mean, there is no point, achieving something but being unhappy the entire time that you get there, and it's recognizing that there are always going to be ups and downs with anything we undertake in life. We're not going to enjoy every single step. However, we need to be very clued in as to how to get ourselves out of those little blips, or those little kind of stagnating areas that we get into sometimes, when we just get a little bit overwhelmed. And positive affirmations don't help, sorry guys, but these actually make us feel worse more often than not, and research has shown this. What we can do though is point ourselves to the direction of what we can achieve and what we can believe. So instead of using a positive affirmation, take something on board that is realistic and pragmatic, and that you can actually believe, and then remind yourself of that on a regular basis. So as opposed to being like, oh yeah, I'm successful in all of my goals, which isn't true, you can be like, okay, do you know what, I'm going to complete what I set out to do today, and I'm going to be proud of myself for doing so. And again, it's just a kind of a twerk on how it is that you talk to yourself, but it can really make a substantial difference. And it's distancing yourself from the rumination and the stories and all of the obstacles that you create in your mind, because again, we're very capable, and yes, we have limitations, and yes, we have to work within those, but when it comes to most things, we talk ourselves out of doing them before we even begin. So it's recognizing that, as I said, your brain is going to be working against you, and you can put all of your energy into anxiety and all of the reasons why you shouldn't do something, or you can plow all of your energy into giving it a go, because I mean, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I hope everyone's having a lovely day. I'll talk to you again soon. If you would like to work with me, you'll get me on my website. It's fundamentals.ie.